Okay, my name is Lawrence McGlynn, and you're listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHMWPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Councilmember Rue Landau, who will discuss her recent ICE legislation and update us on her upcoming budget priorities. Lance Haber will walk us through the issues with Trump's prescription plan, and Vanessa Maria Graber will report on the recent unlicensed dog breeding bill. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. We have a lot going on tonight, so why don't we just jump right into our interview with Councilmember Rue Landau? Right, Councilmember Rue Landau, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So some of the most consequential legislation brought forward this session is the ICE out package that you and Minority Leader Brooks introduced 2 weeks ago. Can you walk us through that legislation, what it does?
Sure. Well, can I start by telling you why we introduced it? We introduced it because Donald Trump and the federal administration is descending on cities around America and using violence and intimidation tactics to round up immigrants and also really harm everyone from protesters to killing American citizens. It's gotten very out of control that he's militarized his ICE agents, and it's extremely dangerous. And we want to make sure that we are protecting Philadelphia. So what our package of bills does, there's 7 of them, and the package keeps ICE out of the shadows, ensuring that ICE agents can't wear face masks. They can't use unmarked vehicles, and they have to show their badges and identification. Keeps ICE out of our data, bans agreements with ICE like 287G agreements, and prohibits city agencies and departments from collaborating with ICE. And it also prohibits city departments or agencies from collecting citizenship and immigration data. It then prohibits anyone in the city from discriminating against anybody based on their citizenship or immigration status. So you can't withhold services if somebody wants to get a permit or pay a bill or go use our health centers or our libraries. And finally, it prohibits the city from using city-owned property and areas as from allowing ICE to use it as staging areas. So we don't want our rec centers, our libraries, or even our big public parking lots to be used for ICE to keep their vehicles there, their tear gas, their weapons, any of the structures that they're going to use to create a perimeter. We don't want to help them in any way at all. They're on their own, and they shouldn't use our city resources for it. So that's the package. But in general, just, what it really does is codify our welcoming cities executive orders that are still holding strong now, but they're not embedded into our law. Our joint package would keep those protections in place, which could be a life or death decision for our immigrant residents. So we're codifying those welcoming cities policies and expanding on them and adding other protections. Our welcoming cities executive orders were created starting in 2009 and then again all the way through 2016. And what we're seeing now with our federal government's excessive funding of ICE, which also includes a lack of training, is a very dangerous situation if ICE is going to come to town. And the new situation, our current situation with ICE, where it is overly funded and less and with less training, is causing us to add more protections here in Philadelphia.
Do you think that some of this legislation will make it less likely ICE will come here because they wouldn't have any cooperation from the city government?
That's unclear. I think that, well, I agree. Yes. Is it, ICE has more hurdles to overcome in states and cities that don't have cooperation agreements. That's great. We want to keep it that way. But I don't think they're using that to decide where they're going and when. ICE is already here in Philadelphia. They're already separating families. There are people who are disappearing, whether they're going to an immigration appointment that they were expected to go to, or sometimes just leaving their houses. This is, it's a really dire situation. And while the federal government has stated that they want to get dangerous criminals off the streets, nationally, less than 14% of the people they've rounded up and taken away have had violent criminal records. Instead, they've killed 32 people, I believe, and there's thousands who are being detained.
That's right. So to change gears a little bit here, we're entering budget season. The state budget was introduced last week. That is the thing that signals the city budget will be on its way. Before we get into what your priorities are, how do you prepare for this? Because you're given this huge document. And so how do you break that down? How do you work through it?
First of all, I have a great team, a smart, excellent team. I think my third year in, this is getting easier and better. The first year felt a little more overwhelming. It is a huge document. There's a lot to look into. And if you wanted to look into every area in detail, you'll never get through it. So you have to focus. And I think each one of us kind of breaks down what our main priorities are, or the areas in which we want to dissect and look into further. And again, it's easier. It's easier for two reasons. One, because I've done it before, but two, because we've asked questions that were answered, and now I get to follow up on the things that were answered last year or the year before. If it was a program, was it done? Was it effective? Are you asking for more money for that program or another program? What were the results? Those are the questions that I would ask going forward. But I'm really looking closely at issues around arts, tech, housing, and more. These are the areas that I've been focusing on in general. And some of it is to ensure that those areas are funded properly. And the second reason, you were catching me on Super Bowl Monday, to make sure that those areas are funded adequately, but also to make sure that they're delivering on their promises from years before.
And are there, well, you brought up one thing. I just want to go back to this really quick. I think it was in October. You held what I thought was a very informative hearing on AI at Philly I don't think we've spoken since then. So just quickly, what for you came out of that hearing that are you concerned? Are you feel okay where we are? Is there a lot more work to do? What was your reaction to that?
I, like my colleagues on my committee, as well as most of the public, left feeling very concerned. And I left with more questions than answers. I also, as the chair of the tech committee, have been to many innovation and tech events since then, and I've learned a lot inside casual conversations about the positive things AI can do for the city of Philadelphia, and also the fears people hold. There's a lot more work to do in this area, and I'm coming up with my next plan on how to tackle that.
Okay. And what are some of the other things you're going to be keeping an eye on in this session as we get up to June?
In the budget session, or
just in general?
Just in general. I'm very interested in how we the funding priorities that will come from the administration, and how we balance that with the priorities of council. Hopefully they match up. And ensuring that we are protecting ourselves not only from ICE and other potential federal invasions, but also federal cuts. The politics start at the local level, and we need to make sure that we are funding the things that keep our government afloat and well funded, and that we don't go backwards on any of our gains because of federal funding cuts. Most importantly, as you know, this year is our 250th America's 250th birthday. And we also have so many great conventions and FIFA World Cup and other huge events coming to Philadelphia. That's a lot to balance this year. One, to make sure that Philadelphia is going to shine, and also to make sure that we are keeping the city affordable for everyday Philadelphians. We need to make sure that while all of these folks come in as visitors, that we are funding things such as the arts that will dazzle them and hopefully have them come back. So you don't just come to 2026, come to Philadelphia in 2026 once.
All right, I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Home.
Hi, Councilmember Landau.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How I hope you're getting through Super Bowl Monday.
Once I find the words, I am.
Now, before you became a council person, one of the jobs you held is you were the chair of the Human Relations Commission here in Philadelphia, which means that there were a lot of things that you had to deal with in that position, that had to deal with how people sometimes mistreat each other in certain circumstances. Last week's public comment, right off the bat, kind of, let us all know that this was not going to be a nice, pleasant, public comment session. And one of the things that was mentioned was I guess it was a protest or a gathering of some kind on Rittenhouse Square that turned anti-Semitic, and whether or not council responded correctly to it. And in the course of that, a slur was used. When you're sitting there in council and you hear some of the testimony from people when it comes to immigration, when it comes to stuff like that, protest, when it comes to different things, do you ever want to put your, former head of the Human Relations Commission hat back on and say, what are you doing?
Last Thursday was an emotional day, but dealing with identities and it is an emotional issue. I learned a long time ago that there's a line between free speech and hate speech, and we will have to figure out how to balance free speech so we don't turn into the enemy, who is whitewashing American history, for example, and trying to silence folks like our federal government, and still allow people to share their expression, but to try to do it in a productive way. So yes, my Human Relations Commission hat is always on. I'm always trying to balance educating people who need it, and trying to see if there is a way to find any kind of common ground. We're finding what's happening in council's public sessions now to be getting, it's even more, the speech is getting more heated and more offensive than it was in the previous 2 years that I've been here. There are a way that you can control time, place, and manner of speech that is not controlling the content of speech in a way that will hopefully find a balance that we as a city council body can send the message that we are not here to give people a platform for their hate, but we do still want to have productive sessions. Some of this is not a surprise, as we've seen our federal government, especially with our president, kind of giving free rein and license to hate across America. His rhetoric fans the flames of increased hateful language, hateful actions that turn to violence. I was the executive director of the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations during Trump 1.0. I saw the immediate rise in hate and bias incidents, and sometimes hate crimes in Philadelphia during that time. And I know they're dealing with it even more now. I will never forget that the very first day when Trump won the primary in Trump 1.0, the very first call to our office came from a mom who said that her 20-something-year-old daughter was chased down the street by men screaming, "It's Trump's America now." There were, like there are now, so many more unreported incidents of hateful notes left on cars, graffiti on sides of houses, people moving because of the fear, language that is used that is so hateful, it causes pain. And again, this is a top-down trickle from a president who believes that it is okay to act in this manner, to use this language, to divide, to punch down, and we will not have it here in Philadelphia. So there is a balance that we can create in city council that does not hamper free speech, but at the same time sets a standard of expectations and respect for the body that will lead us forward and hopefully lead us past what I hope will only be 4 years of this nightmare.
Now, in his budget address, Governor Shapiro had a section on artificial intelligence and some things he wants to do with it. Have you had a chance to look at that? And do you think that in terms of regulating it here in the Commonwealth, that it goes far enough? What would you like to see?
We're still digging into that. So I can't comment too directly on it. We're still digging in, but there's a variety of paths that people want to go down for AI. And we're, as Larry was already asking, this was something we're absolutely still looking into, including our second phase of AI. We've already put out a resolution on data centers, and that will be one of the areas that we'll be holding a hearing on. We know that there's already been hearings on the state level on data centers and how to put guardrails around them so consumers aren't paying for them, and they are having the least amount of environmental effect possible, which is very possible to do. And it seems that the governor is in line with that trajectory, and that's exactly what we wanted to look at here in Philadelphia as well.
Now, he also brought up the issue of housing, and specifically a $1 billion bond issue that looks at infrastructure and housing being among those things. As as the co-chair of the housing committee here in council, when you look at what the state and what the city can do together in terms of housing, is that something that comes up a lot? Are you hopeful with this bond issue that there is more cooperation between the two entities and we can get at least, some of the housing crisis figured out?
Yeah. First of all, I'm the vice chair. I
Oh.
want to clear that up, not the co-chair. I'm the vice chair of housing. I'm very hopeful about the state funding for housing in conjunction with what we've already done here in Philadelphia with Home is just a win-win situation. And there are certain things I believe that can be funded with that state money that will take us even further than where we got in Philadelphia. Look, if we do this right, Philadelphia, the counties, the entire state of Pennsylvania will be, leading the rest of the country on how to invest to make sure that we are we're keeping housing affordable and creating new housing opportunities. I love where we're going here. It's kind of a win-win-win for everybody. And also, the governor also introduced certain caps, the governor introduced certain restrictions on rental application fees, move-in costs. And that is exactly what I'd already done here in Philadelphia with my move-in affordability plan, where I capped application fees and also set a standard for at times when you can pay your security deposit and installment payments. But he came out with restrictions on application fees as well. I feel like Philadelphia is leading the pack here. It's glad to have a partner in the governor and the whole state of Pennsylvania. But this partnership, I think, will really transform what we're doing with housing. Again, keeping it affordable, keeping us building, keeping as many units as we need and at prices where people can afford them. All eyes are on Philly and Pennsylvania now.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to give you back to Lawrence McGlynn, my co-host, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you, Denise. And Councilmember Landau, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
You too. All right. We'd like to thank Councilmember Landau for joining us on the show. And now I'd like to bring on Lance Haver.
Hi. Good evening. How are you both?
Good, Lance. How are you?
All right. So I have two things to report on, but I think really the more important point right now is what's going on at the former quote unquote White House at 6th and Market, where enslaved people built it and supported George Washington, probably against their will. And now President Trump is trying to take down that history. And one of the things that he's claiming that he's doing it for is because white people are going to feel bad when they find out that the country was built upon the backs of enslaved people. And I find that curious, and I just wanted to give a little personal talk and then show the video. I spent most of my time growing up in a very small rural town where there were some factories, but it was mostly farming, and it was predominantly white. When I say predominantly, 95%. And it was Republican. Our state senator was Republican. Our state representative was Republican. We were too small to have mayors. It's a very different type of government. But one of the things that we learned in school was about how people were enslaved. Although those words we used then were slaves, how they were enslaved. And the town had tremendous pride in saying that they were part of the Underground Railroad. And we learned in school and went on field trips in school to visit the locations where the enslaved people were escaping to freedom. And this was all white folks. They were all people whose background and history and forefathers were white folk. And the pride that the town had and that we all had in identifying with people who helped as opposed to enslaved, as the people who stood for freedom as opposed to stood for enslavement, was tremendous. And so when President Trump says he thinks he's worried that white people will feel bad because they'll identify with the enslavers, I don't really understand why he thinks that. It doesn't make any sense, and it's very much in opposition to what I grew up with. That being said, I'd like to show the video of the demonstration calling for the truth to be told at the original White House in Philadelphia. So if we could call that up, that would be great. I think we lost it, Larry. We don't have the video running.
Welcome, everyone. We're standing here today at the memorial to the enslaved people of the United States here at the President's house. Standing here, I'm reminded, just looking at all the people out here today, I see the true America. Not a MAGA America, not a fascist America, but a democratic America, a liberty-loving America, an equality-loving America, an America that truly lives up to the better angels of our nature that Lincoln spoke about, not to the lesser demons that dominate.
You know, when this thing started, it was because this site was excavated. And the truth had been buried. And when they dug down into the ground, what they found was the president's house. What they found was the truth. And you can't hide the truth. If you try to pry the truth off of walls, the truth will rise up and make itself known again. You can't hide the truth. Not by prying it off the walls, not by changing up this site, not by leaving these rusty things where this truth, where this stories used to be. If you want to hide the truth of slavery, you're going to have to do a whole lot more than this. If you want to hide the truth of slavery in Philadelphia, then you got to dig up Girard Avenue because it's named after an enslaver named Stephen Girard. If you want to hide the truth of slavery in Philadelphia, you got to destroy Front and Market because it was a slave market where my people were sold. If you want to hide the truth of slavery in Philadelphia, you got to change the name of Chew Avenue because it's named after a family of enslavers. If you want to hide the truth of slavery in Philadelphia, you got to destroy the whole neighborhood of Logan because it's named after James Logan, who was an enslaver. If you want to hide the truth of slavery in Philadelphia, you might as well tear down the whole city because it was built on the blood of my people. You cannot hide the truth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Put the truth back in this house.
Education of what some historians term as America's peculiar institution.
Tell the truth.
Yes, racist historians didn't even have the courage to record in history books what was clearly chattel slavery.
What I have is this: people say, well, we're in a new society. It's multicultural and everything flows. I say, okay, let me ask you this question. And I ask it as a criminal defense attorney for the last 30 years. Today, in 2026, if you had to be a defendant in a criminal case, all things equal, same income, same job, same religion, same wardrobe, same house, but you could go to court as a black man or a white man, which would you select? This is 2026 and you know the answer. You're driving up Temple University on Broad Street, 2 o'clock in the morning. Lights and sirens from a police car pull up behind you. And as the cop gets out of his car and approaches you, you could be a white driver or a black driver. Which would you select? Those are rhetorical questions that answer why we need to fight. And when I wrap this up in 8 minutes, because it hasn't started yet, but when I wrap this up in 8 minutes, I want you to ask yourself, what are you doing? We look back 200 years ago and say, damn it, if I was white 200 years ago, I'd have been with John Brown. Today is your John Brown moment. If you're black and say, I would have been with Nat Turner, today is your Nat Turner movement. You have to do something. Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. It's all about people power. And he also said, agitate, agitate, agitate. Now, believe it or not, my 8 minutes starts. Here we go. I want to put all this in context to tell you how we got to where we are. And this is what happened. In 2002, in late May, early June of 2022, there was a newspaper article indicating that the Liberty Bell Center, which then was at Fifth and Market, had to move because it was too cramped, too crowded, and too congested. And by the way, at the time I was working with the great Charles W. Bowser Esquire. Between him and Cecil Moore, I don't know who's the greatest. They're both the greatest. Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali greatest. But my point is, 2002, newspaper article, Liberty Bell Center has to move from Fifth and Market, 1 block west of Sixth and Market. Charles Bowser introduced me to the great Mary Mason, the voice of Black Philadelphia, I guess from the 80s to the early 2000s. And every time Mary Mason was on vacation, she'd have me sitting in as a guest host. So I announced to the black audience that, hey, the Liberty Bell Center is moving. They said, interesting, but not really relevant to us. I also told them the news in 2002 that the new site of America's first White House, right here, 6th and Market. Back in 1790, it was called the President's House, the Executive Mansion, the Robert Morris Mansion, but it served as America's first White House under something called the Federal Act of 1790. 2010. Write this down because the exam is coming shortly. December 15, 2010, there was the grand opening right here where you stand of the first, this is important, the first slavery memorial of its kind on federal property in the history of the United States of America. Right here at 6th and Market. And once we won that on December 15, 2010, everything was great until it wasn't. And it wasn't 15 years later, in January 2025, when the guy in the White House issued dozens and dozens of executive orders. And every single executive order that pertained to black people was anti-black. It was anti-DEI, anti-critical race theory, anti-affirmative action, just anti-blacks. That's January of 2025. Then we fast forward to March of 2025. And some of the other speakers alluded to this, but let me just break it down a little bit. March of 2025, the guy in the White House looks around the country and said, hey, I'm looking at all these federal historical sites, and I don't like what I'm seeing because these sites are, quote, inappropriately disparaging, unquote, America's past and living. That's March of 2025. Let's fast forward to May of 2025. That's when he gets Doug Burgum, his Interior Department Secretary, to issue an order specifically targeting this site. And with that directive in May of 2025, he had a 120-day deadline. That would have taken us to September 17. But folks like you, me, and others raised so much hell, September 17 came and went. Nothing in September, nothing in October, nothing in December. All of a sudden, January 22, 2:57 p.m., some vandals, and I do mean vandals, dispatched from the White House with giant crowbars. I mean, these were burglary tools that even my clients don't carry around. So I knew they were serious. So when they did, allegedly, my clients. But my point is this. When we saw those vandals use those gigantic weapons, and that's what they were, weapons to pull down what was the essence of the site, we knew the fight was on. A wise person once said, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And we stayed ready since 2002. So immediately we got our legal team together, and we basically put together a strategy that was taken from our ancestors in the civil rights struggle in the 50s and 60s. Raise hell on the streets and raise issues in the court. Raise hell in the streets and raise issues in the courts. And that's exactly what we did. And the final thing I'll say before I tell you what I think the marching order should be, when we were in federal court right across the street a couple Fridays ago, the judge asked the government attorneys, where are the items? Where are the interpretive panels? The interesting thing is that the attorneys didn't really give a clear answer. They said, quote, the items are on the grounds of the National Constitution Center. And the judge is very sharp, by the way, appointed by a Republican. The judge said, basically, what the hell does that mean? Is it in the National Constitution Center? We found out that there's a section in or near the National Constitution Center that doesn't belong to the center. It belongs to the federal government. So they took that stuff and put it in an undisclosed place. I really want to tell you where it was, but we were sworn to secrecy. So the Monday after that Friday in court, the judge meets with all of us. We meet in the National Constitution Center, and we agree that the reporters can't go in, the staff of the National Constitution Center can't go in, but the lawyers involved. But we couldn't tell anybody where we went. Did fight. I meant what I said about the white folks here. If you would have joined with John Brown 200 years ago, join with us today. To the black folks, if you would have joined with Nat Turner 200 years ago, you need to join with them right now. So we need people to become a part of this attack army. We need them to email us and to call us. And the final thing I say, and this is really the final, I really mean it this time. Often people look at attack, ATAC, and they hype up or get upset about the A, avenge. They think that avenge and revenge are the same thing. They're not. They're not even synonymous. Revenge means to do the same bad thing to you that you did to me. Avenge means to focus on justice for the victims. And every now and then, I think about changing our name to Revenge the Ancestors Coalition. Thank you very much.
So I think that was about as powerful as it could be. I don't think there's much I could add. I was a little disappointed that all the elected officials who showed up to support it, not a single one of them said, I'm going to a monument for enslaved people. You know, if you walk through Philadelphia, there are a number of monuments that call attention to the Holocaust, and rightfully so. But there is no single monument in Philadelphia that calls attention to the enslavement of the African Americans who built the country. There's no monument that calls attention to the Native people who had their land stolen. And while maybe we can't stop President Trump, we certainly can allocate money to build a monument that remembers and calls attention to and teaches generation after generation what the enslavement meant. And we can build it right across the street from the Liberty Bell. So no matter how upset Donald Trump gets, it's right there. People who come to visit the Liberty Bell will see it. And it is one of the things that we can do, and I argue we should do, to make sure the full history of the United States is told. So generations to come, people will understand what the enslavement meant.
All right. Well, Lance, thank you. Oh, Denise, you're muted there.
I just wanted to know real quick before you left, did anyone at the rally mention anything about the lawsuit that the city had filed regarding the president's house, when it will be heard again? Because I know that the judge was supposed to be visiting the site so that she could get a look at it.
If there was a clear date, I didn't hear it. The crowd was pretty big, and there was a fair amount of background noise. So it may have been, but I didn't hear it, and it wasn't on the flyer, and it wasn't on any of the handouts. And as of yet, there's been no request for people to show up in the courtroom.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lance.
All right. Now I'd like to bring on Vanessa Maria Graver to tell us a little bit about this backyard breeding bill.
Okay. For some reason, it's...
This is a bill that was introduced by Councilmember Cindy Bass, I guess last year at the end of the year. And it basically means if you have dogs and you don't have a license, you can't breed them in the city. Now, there's some questions about that, about enforcement and things like that. But overall, I think we understand the concept here because, oh, there's Vanessa. You can explain it.
That's right. You were actually doing a great job of explaining the backyard breeding bill. Yeah, it was introduced by Councilmember Cindy Bass back in November of 2025, and it's bill number 250989, and that would amend Title 10 of the City Code by adding sections 10 through 119 in an effort to help with the crisis of thousands of dogs entering the shelter each year. The bill would impose a temporary moratorium on the breeding and selling of dogs under 7 months of age in Philadelphia. The bill would not impact adoptions done by nonprofit animal rescues or breeders licensed by the state. And so the bill was recently voted unanimously out of committee on Tuesday, February 3rd. And Council Member Bass gave a statement about the importance of this bill and shout out the city's Animal Shelter Act, also known as ACCT. And the reason why I wanted to bring it up on the show is because the bill is going to be heard on Thursday, tomorrow, February 12th, by the full council. And there is some opposition to the bill. And so I've been seeing this circulated a lot on neighborhood groups, online. I've seen different rescues, animal shelters also draw attention to the bill. And yeah, I wanted to make sure that our viewers and listeners knew all about it. Now, it is a little bit hard to see, so I'm going to read some of these statistics. And the bill is being supported by ACT. And I want to read some of these statistics. The intake in January alone for ACT was 678 dogs. And they say it's an intake number they haven't hit since 2016. They finished the year in December of 2025 with 636 dogs. And that's 8 months in a row. And 9 out of the last 10 months, the ACT had 600 plus dogs coming into its center. And that is the worst and largest intake since 2026. And so back in 2020, they had about 4,000 dogs coming to ACT, and they didn't have to euthanize any dogs at all except for medical emergencies. In 2025, that number skyrocketed to 7,430 dogs. And they had to euthanize between 75 and 93 dogs every month. So you can look at some of those numbers here on this graphic. This is the report, and you can see 636 dogs that were taken in. Most of them are strays. 154 were relinquished by their owner. And that's for the adult dogs. 8 puppies were relinquished. So because of the housing crisis, the affordability crisis, there are a lot more owner surrenders as well. And then unfortunately, you can see the number of dogs that they euthanized, which is 78 dogs. And that was in December 21, which I imagine are, requested by the owner due to medical issues. And so that is a huge, huge number. And advocates of the bill believe that this bill will help with the number of dogs coming into it. They say that the overwhelming majority of these dogs, 96,000 that ACT has taken in since it started, are pit bulls and huskies. And so they have done DNA testing and found that 47% of those tested had at least 25% common DNA. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of questions around who this bill is targeting. The AKC is opposed. I looked on their website. They have action alerts. They're also calling people to come to city council tomorrow. And they said, while the bill includes limited exemptions, it would significantly restrict responsible, small-scale American Kennel Club affiliated breeders while failing to address the real sources of shelter crowding and irresponsible owners and breeders. And they say that the bill would not stop irresponsible or underground breeders who are unlikely to comply with a ban. Instead, it would push puppy buyers toward unregulated internet sellers and scams, placing animal welfare at greater risk. And the proposal will also limit access to purpose-bred dogs, including service, therapy, working, search, and rescue dogs, and would do little to reduce the shelter intake while removing ethical local breeding programs. And ACT says this temporary dog breeding moratorium won't be a silver bullet, but it will be a much needed tool in their toolbox to help them get to a place where healthy and adoptable dogs get the time they need to find homes and rescues. So I guess we'll see tomorrow. It's on the second reading of the bill. And I think the biggest question that many folks ask, and you asked this question, Larry, is how would this be enforced if it were to pass? And I do think that the AKC brings up a good question that people who are illegally engaging already in dog breeding activities are unlikely to stop doing what they're doing just because there's a ban in place. So I think there are a lot of questions about enforcement. And I just want to bring up two other things, which is like last time I came on, we talked about the cold weather and code blue and the number of people reporting dogs being outside in the very cold weather. And there seems to be a lot of frustration about the enforcement of that as well, right? People complaining, they're calling the hotlines, nobody's coming, they're being forced to call 911, making the police come out instead. There are other cases of animal welfare and animal cruelty that many folks have said that have gone unanswered. They've reported on the website. And so it does seem questionable right now. It doesn't seem like there is a lot of capacity to enforce the current regulations. So it is a question of who and how are they going to enforce this? And especially if they are underground doing this in their homes, how is the public going to get involved and report on? Basically, it's going to depend on people reporting their neighbors, but if they're already doing that and there's no consequences, you wonder what the deal is. Another point I agree with the AKC is that I do think this might be a temporary solution, but one of the underlying causes, right, of this is poverty, right? A lot of people are not able to take care of their animals because of the high cost of food. Many owners surrender their dogs who have medical conditions because they can't pay the vet bills. And a lot of people have issues with housing. It is very difficult to find housing with a dog, especially a breed like pit bulls and larger breeds like huskies and German shepherds who that are banned in many areas. So I think this might be a good first step on a temporary solution, but definitely need some longer term solutions to be able to keep animals in homes with their owners. And in full transparency, I did adopt a dog from the SPCA. Sometimes you see it make an appearance on the hall monitor, and I do often advocate for people to adopt. But yeah, we want to hear from you, our viewers. What do you think of this proposed legislation? Do you think it will help solve the problem with the overcrowding at shelters? Let us know. contact us on our social media, and we would love to hear more.
It'll be interesting, maybe 6 months or a year from now to see if there were any reported incidents of this bill being violated. But, we'll find out.
Yeah, and their goal is to get that number back to 4,000 intakes. And so it's good that these agencies have to put these monthly and yearly reports out. So that's something that we can track as journalists and see if the bill passes, did that number actually go down? We'll have to wait and see. And next week, we'll let you all know what happens.
All right. Thank you so much, Vanessa. And now we'd like to bring back Lance Haver to tell us a little bit about the Trump prescription plan, so much as it is.
Well, I'd like to say it's great news, but like most of what Trump does, it's mostly for show. I'd like to call up the slideshow if I can get it up. Thank you. So, first of all, you have to get over the fact that he named it after himself. It's a big hurdle, but okay. It's not the worst thing in the world to be an egomaniac who has to name everything after yourself, including a train station in New York and an airport in Washington, D.C. But if it really helped people, it wouldn't be that much to swallow. What is the plan? So the plan is very simple. He has negotiated with drug companies for lower prices. And of course, that's a good thing. That's what Bernie Sanders and other people were calling for years and years and years. But the way he did it is really very limiting. So if you go through Trump RX, you can't use your insurance. So even though the price has come down of the medicine, the cost to you is actually going up because no longer are you limited to a copay. Now you have to pay 100% of the cost. And it's clear, this is directly from his webpage. Will you have to pay cash? And the answer is yes. The answer is, can I use my insurance to buy drugs listed on Trump RX? At this time, Trump RX discounted pricing is only available for cash paying patients. If you used to pay a copay, now you don't pay a copay. You pay 100% of whatever Trump negotiated. How well will it work? Well, we don't know. Trump says himself, well, we're not sure how the pharmacies are going to do it. And we won't know for a while. Now, that doesn't mean it will necessarily be bad, but the best projection of the future is based on the past. And if you look at Trump's past declarations, the tariffs, and everything else, it's really hard to believe that this is going to end well for people who are struggling to pay medicine costs. And I know that every chance Trump gets, he says how bad Biden is. But this plan of his, Trump RX, is built on what Biden did in 2022. President Biden, when he signed the Inflation Reduction Act, put into it that the government was going to be able to negotiate for drug costs for Medicare. That's what Trump is doing. Now, Trump has expanded that. It's not just for Medicare patients, it's for everybody. But the difference is that the Biden plan allows you to use your insurance, so you still are only paying the copay, not the full cost. Trump, you have to pay the full cost. And, President Trump tells us what a great negotiator he is and how much better he is than everyone else. But when you actually look at who negotiated a better deal for consumers, it's somewhat confusing. Biden only has done 10 drugs and only for Medicare. Trump has done 47 drugs, and they're not the same drugs. It's really confusing. But if you find one drug that they both negotiated over, Biden did a better job. Trump negotiated the price of the medicine to $181.59 for 30 days worth of pills. Biden got it to $178.50. But here's again the major point. For Biden, you don't pay the full $178.50, you only pay the copay. And for Trump, you pay the entire $181.59. So again, it may not be that effective. And I know we had a lot we went over tonight, so I'm not going to take the time to look at all the different medicines that Trump negotiated down the price. But be clear, that Biden negotiated the price, but be clear, Trump has negotiated more drugs than Biden did, and Trump negotiated for everyone, not just Medicare patients. Unfortunately, Trump's plan that he's put in place actually does more harm than good. 85% of Americans have health insurance, which includes prescription plan. So there's only 15% of us who won't have to buy medicine outside of our healthcare plans. By forcing consumers to pay cash means that we won't get the benefit of our copay. And by ending the federal subsidies, by focusing on negotiating prices and bragging about it, and not doing anything about the federal subsidies, the average healthcare plan under the Affordable Care Act has doubled. In Pennsylvania alone, 85,000 people were unable to keep up with the doubling of their health insurance. And as a result, they lost their prescription plan. So no matter what President Trump has done in lowering costs through negotiations, 85,000 people are going to end up paying more because they don't have any health insurance. So yes, it's a good thing for the government to use its collective buying power, just like Bernie Sanders and other progressives and Joe Biden have been trying to do for years. But the way it's being done actually ends up harming people. Now, the final point I want to make is Trump has negotiated these prices, which is the same thing that you see the companies advertising on television doing, whether it's Single Care or Prescription RX. It doesn't matter which company it is. They all do the same thing. They use their collective buying power like a co-op to negotiate a price. But you'd think that Trump would do a better job than the private company. But that's not the case in this one drug. And again, there are a lot of drugs in a lot of different situations, and some clearly Trump has negotiated a better price than Single Care. But if you look drug by drug by drug, it's not clear that the Trump plan is better. You'd be better off if you're struggling to pay for prescription. You're better off not just looking at Trump RX, but looking at Single Care and other options as well. So in this drug, you can see that it's far less if you buy it from Single Care than if you buy it from Trump RX. In addition, many of the companies, many of the pharmaceutical companies already offer a discount if you buy the medicine directly from them for cash. And many of them have programs to help people. Now, I'm not a big believer that healthcare should be based on charity, nor am I a big believer that corporations are quote unquote good citizens and help people. Corporations are in place to do one thing and one thing alone, and that's to make money. It's not evil, it's not bad, but that's what their role in our society is. They're here to make money. They're not here to deliver healthcare. They're not here to help people who are struggling. They're not here to do anything other than help their stockholders make money. So that's what's really in the plan. And as I said, we could go over it time and time again, but like most of the things that Trump has done, it looks good. It's the true work of a con artist. Trump says, I've negotiated prices to bring them down, and then leaves the rest of the conversation out. You can't get a prescription for any of these medicines unless you can go to a doctor. And if you don't have health insurance, going to the doctor is cost prohibitive. Yeah. The best plan is a health insurance plan that covers medicine. And it's such a healthcare. I know that Trump was famous for making this speech. He promised that he would have better healthcare than Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, on day one. And then 3 years later, he said, who knew healthcare was so confusing? Who knew it was so difficult? Who knew it was so hard? And I think everybody who follows healthcare knows it is a very difficult issue. There are many moving parts. There's Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance companies, the Affordable Care Act. What do we do for people who don't need health insurance right now because they're young and healthy? What do we do for people who need it desperately? How do we work all these pieces together? I don't want to be one of those people who suggest, oh, if I were in charge, I would have a simple solution. There is not a simple solution for this. But lying to the American people doesn't help. It doesn't help to say, hey, I've solved the problem when the problem isn't solved.
All right. Well, Lance, thank you so much for that. And we're going to be talking more about that as time goes on. We will be back next week with City Budget Director Sabrina Maynard as we enter budget season. So we'll see you next week on Hall Monitor.